There is no fear when the night comes around. We feel safe 'cause you are around. Like the sun is shining when the rain comes down. You're the light, oh Imam is Aman. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. We stand in awe of everything you do. We are proud and strong 'cause of you. You live the meaning of Islam every day and encourage us to follow through. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. Your love for us is infinite, too marvelous for words. It fills our hearts with purity, with pride, unity, and hope. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. Come, my sisters, come, my brothers, let's celebrate. 60 years Mullah have devoted to us. Let's be together and bring him this joy. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. One Jamaat, one Imam. Together we stand true. Together we stand true. Together we stand true.
Stand up because we all are one, sharing life from the same sun, passed down for generations. One light alone, we stand up just like it had begun, sharing rays from the desert sun, passed down for generations.
سرت رقص و شادی کنه خوش و خندان باشه 100 ساله خدمت IBC آمده
On va fêter, allez, on va danser, allez, fêtons les volontaires. Un siècle de service aux frères et sœurs, le travail se monte bien du cœur.
दिल तेरे मुरीदों का देता गवाही रे मौला तेरे रहमत के आशीष हमने पाए रे अरे झूमो झूमो सब नाचो गाओ जश्न मनाओ रे IBC सेवा की सेंचुरी आए रे सेंचुरी आए रे सेंचुरी आए रे Learning to lead one IV, that is the vision of Imam-e-Zaman. We aim to accomplish the mandate of Sir Sultan Shah's Farman. My flecky, जहाँ में सारी ये खिदमत में शान बढ़ाई रे My flecky, जहाँ में सारी ये खिदमत में शान बढ़ाई रे दिल तेरे मुरीदों का देता गवाही रे मौला तेरे रहमत के आशीष हमने पाए रे
هم کف سرت رقص و شادی کنه خوش و خندان باشه 100 ساله خدمت IBC آمده
On va fêter, allez, on va danser, allez, fêtons les volontaires. Un siècle de service aux frères et sœurs, le travail se monte bien du cœur.
अरे झूमो झूमो सब नाचो गाओ जश्न मनाओ रे IBC सेवा की सेंचुरी आए रे अकीदत का बरकत का सिलसिला ये मोहब्बत का हर मुश्किल में साथ मिला हमको अपने मौला का कहना यही सुनना यही चलती रहे शमा बस कयामत तक कहना यही सुनना यही चलती रहे शमा बस
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
To Kingston now, where one woman's making a big difference in the community by hand sewing cloth masks.
In just a few weeks, she's made hundreds of them, and she's not slowing down. CTV's Kimberly Johnson has that story.
This is a familiar sound in the Adupur household these days. Mahwash Adupur, busy making masks for friends and family, and even complete strangers. And make them she has. Since April, she has churned out 400 masks, spending hours every day and every night.
We've been volunteers since a very young age. We like working in groups and helping out. So this gave me a great opportunity to give back to Canada, who has given so much to us.
Latif Haji hauls a pallet of food into Edmonton's food bank.
It's a very uncertain time in our life. We feel like we all need to come together and do our part.
Haji is part of a national volunteer initiative called Ismaili Civic, supporting Canadians during the month of Ramadan.
The current health crisis just brought this opportunity. It's presented us with this to sort of highlight the ethics and values of our faith.
Those ethics were put into action.
We still need blood donors. So if you're able, consider going in and donating.
They gave me a lot of blood. Now I can grow old and be happy.
The collateral damage from this pandemic is the heavy toll on our mental health. A new survey this week found 84% of respondents reported their mental health concerns had worsened since the outbreak. And as Jeff Semple reports, thousands of Canadians are now stepping up to offer support to those in need.
To be able to see the Ismaili Muslim community step forward, to help once again those who are in needy, is something to be proud of.
I must also thank you, Prime Minister, for inviting me to become an honorary citizen. May I congratulate you on the gold medals of your remarkable hockey teams in Sochi. As an ex-player myself, I was hoping you would require your honorary citizens to join your team. I'm convinced that the Dalai Lama and I would have been a formidable defense. One key to Canada's success in building a meritocratic civil society is your recognition that democratic societies require more than democratic governments. I've been impressed by recent studies showing the activity of voluntary institutions and not-for-profit organizations in Canada to be among the highest in the world. This Canadian spirit resonates with a cherished principle in Shia Ismaili culture, the importance of contributing to one's individual energies on a voluntary basis to improving the lives of others. This is not a matter of philanthropy, but rather self-fulfillment, enlightened self-fulfillment. During my Golden Jubilee, and this is important, 6 years ago, Ismailis from around the world volunteered their gifts, not only of wealth, but most notably of time and knowledge in support of our work. We established a time and knowledge framework, a structured process for engaging an immense pool of expertise involving tens of thousands of volunteers. Many of them traveled to the developing countries as part of this outpouring of service. 1/3 of those were Canadians. Their impact has been enormous in helping us to achieve best practice standards in our institutions and programs, making us, we hope, an even better partner for Canada.
His Highness and the Prime Minister are signing a protocol of understanding that will enhance our strategic partnership in a number of areas: the promotion of human rights and socio-economic development, the promotion of trade and economic objectives, and enhanced cooperation in promoting peace abroad and in the fight to reduce poverty in select countries and regions.
Ya Ali Madad, welcome, bienvenue. A very warm welcome to tonight's Friday night reflections to our Jamaat and multi-faith family members. My name is Alwiza Fozia Bhatia and I am coming to you from Vancouver, BC. I am honored to be your host for this program today. Now, the month of September tends to be a very busy one for parents like myself with school-aged children, and this year we had to prepare our children for a different back-to-school experience. Whatever school looks like for your children or grandchildren, whether it is in person, virtual, homeschool, or a combination, I hope that all the young members of our Jamaat have started this school year with curiosity, creativity, friendship, and adventure. This evening, we continue with Friday night reflections, the Jamaat's touch point for the week. We have the privilege of speaking about the notion of service, what Maulana Hazar Imam has called enlightened self-fulfillment, and its central role within the Ismaili Tariqa. It's a notion he beautifully articulated in the excerpts you just saw from his historic address to the Canadian Parliament. This conversation comes at an apt time, as today marks the launch of Ismaili Civic Weekend, when Jamaati members support partner community agencies across the country in activities ranging from shoreline cleanup to collecting donations for the food bank and much, much more. I hope you will have a chance to join one of these activities. And if you are not able to, there are always opportunities at any time to support our fellow citizens and communities across the country, which we can take advantage of. Our special guest this evening is Wazir Shams Villani. Wazir Shams has a lifelong history of service in many capacities. He currently directs special studies at the Institute for Ismaili Studies and is also a contributor and consultant to the Aga Khan Development Network. Wazir Sahib started his career qualifying as a teacher in Kenya and taught for just under 5 years in Tanzania, the last 2 as a principal of an Aga Khan school. Later, he took up a 2-year appointment at Oxford University for research into development issues, followed by a spell in Vancouver, Canada at the Industrial Development Bank. He then joined an agency of the Aga Khan Development Network, there as part of Business Loan Guarantee and Information Program, and then moved to London, where he helped to establish the Institute of Ismaili Studies, which he headed up in the early years. I had the privilege of speaking to Wazir Shams earlier today. Following my conversation with Wazir Shams, we are excited to also feature an excerpt of the special film entitled A Century of Service, commemorating 100 years of the IVC and celebrating the notion of service within the Ismaili Tariqa. I hope you enjoy it. Please grab a tasty snack and let's be inspired together. Wazir Shams, thank you so much for joining us. It is wonderful to be able to speak to you about service in particular, as you have been offering service to the Imam of the time for decades. We have just heard the 2014 address to the Canadian Parliament, where Maulana Hazare Imam used the term enlightened self-fulfillment. In your recently published book called People of Faith, you also say that the very act of Islam, of surrender to Allah, is a matter of conscience to tend one's own soul. Can you elaborate on this concept of enlightened self-fulfillment?
And that's a very good and difficult question, but I'll try to respond as best as I can. I'm reminded of an ayat of the Quran where Allah says, you are here not to. I mean, I'm not quoting verbatim from the Quran. We are here to live as as ordinary human beings, and Muslims are asked by Allah, encouraged by Allah, to compete for goodness, not to ask question whether I am a faithful Muslim or a little less good Muslim, but this is something that a human being cannot answer. It's only Allah who will answer. But in the meantime, while you're on earth, compete for goodness. Now, different individuals would have different understanding, and that is quite okay. I mean, as long as we will realize. I mean, I go back to what I have been reading about the Quran, the tradition of the Prophet, the traditions of the Imams. Giving of yourself for the sake of others is the best way to ensure harmony, social harmony. And you set an example to others. And it's always good that you learn from others and see that others learn from you. So rivalries become friendship. It is not a bad thing to have rivalry, as long as rivalry for good things, compete for good things. I do something and you want to compete to do something, to do the same thing better than I can do. And that helps society. And that is enlightened self-fulfillment. We are all selfish in a way. Human beings are selfish. But our faith teaches us to turn that selfishness into something good, enlightened self-fulfillment.
Wazir Sahib, beautiful messaging there. But one may argue that we live in an increasingly self-centered world, where the notion of living to give service to others is becoming more quaint than central. In the words of our Imam, how do we inspire the Jamaat to reach beyond rampant materialism, self-indulgent individualism, and unprincipled relativism? How do we reconcile the beautiful world that you describe, where personal fulfillment comes from serving others, with the prevailing ethos of the modern world?
I think increasingly people are beginning to realize that you cannot live in isolation from yourself, from others in society. Look at what is happening in the pandemic. Whether you are an Ismaili, Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, Jew, Hindu, people are coming together to help each other. So when the crisis comes, people do respond to that. In UK, I will see the volunteers, hundreds and thousands of volunteers from different communities coming together to help each other. They don't ask whether you are Muslim or Christian. They just want to help human beings overcome this pandemic. That's tremendous service. So I think inherently all individuals want to be selfless. And when the opportunity arises, they seize the challenge and do their best of being good human beings in society. So I would not completely write off the modern society that it is very secularist, materialistic. It is of course, and we have to be aware of the risks. But good things attract people, whether they are of any religious persuasion, of not, they don't belong to any religion. But they are committed to a social ethic of concern and compassionate for those who are disadvantaged and vulnerable in society.
Wazir Sahib, in your book, you say this principle of fidelity is the wellspring of Islam's notion of community. How does service strengthen community?
Tell me, I mean, you're a volunteer. You've got scores of people working with you. How does that strengthen the community? You think we will be what we are without volunteers, without honorary workers in all walks of life? People who are lawyers, politicians, you have senators who are Ismailis, people who are MPs who are Ismailis, but they are serving in their own spheres. And the Imam never says that only serve the Jamaat. Serve the Jamaat, but that does not preclude you from serving society at large. So, and I'll give you examples from our childhood, which I'm sure you have experienced, that in the Jamaat, when young people go to the Jamaat, they get a chance to become volunteers. They get a chance to become Mukhi Mukhyani, members of various committees, and that trains people for leadership. But leadership with a view to serving, not leadership with a view to, serving your own selfish ends. Why do you think in Ismaili the spirit of volunteerism is so strong and so vibrant? Because from the very young age, young children are trained to offer services, and they love to offer services, to serve water, to look after, to be in that shoe department, taking care of shoes and so on. And that is the spirit of our faith.
This reminds me of a quote from your book when you say that the gift of knowledge is among the most burdensome of assets, for its function is to bring light where there is ignorance.
Yeah, I think knowledge is a very great gift. The Quran says, wisdom is an abundant good. Now, if you have been given the privilege of a very good education, you have acquired university degrees, earned knowledge, it's a burden in the sense that if the prophetic tradition says that knowledge that is not used in service is like a girdle of fire around your neck. And there is one prophetic tradition is that knowledge which is used to show that one is knowledgeable and wants to make an impression on the public, then that person does not deserve leadership. Knowledge is, Hazrat emphasizes the ethic of knowledge, the ethic of intellect. Use your intellect, use your knowledge, wisdom to serve the Jamaat and to serve society at large.
Vizier Sahib, the current pandemic that is upon us, and many members of the Jamaat are currently facing challenges, whether it is financial, health, or otherwise, as a result of this pandemic. In your book, you talk about how current tribulations are seen as passing tests of endurance and hence a source of strength. Can you elaborate on this perspective?
There are powerful verses of the Quran that trials and tribulations are a test. Don't be, don't lose your faith. Be firm in your faith. And Islam places tremendous importance on the quality of patience. You must remain patient and don't give up. And look at the Jamaat has faced such a crisis worse than this in the past. Look what happened when the Mongols invaded the Muslim world. They brought down Alamut. They killed thousands of Ismailis, men, women, and children. And after the Alamut period, the Jamaat faced a very physically dismal situation, very distressed, very dismal situation. But the Jamaat retained its resilience because of its faith in the batin of the Imam. They knew that the Imam is there and he will guide us. He will save us with his grace, with his barakah. And today, look, there was the man who accompanied the Mongol leader who brought down Alamut. He wrote in his book, in his history book, that no sign, no trace of this community has been left. It's been completely erased from history. Now, if you go to the Aga Khan Library at the Aga Khan Center, in the special collections, there is a book written by the same person, this enemy of the Ismailis, who was accompanying the Mongol leader. His book is there with us. And his traces, that man's trace is no longer. And how ironical that the community which he tried to eradicate from the world is retaining his book today. And now people are reading it in our library. That has two lessons. Don't underestimate a Jamaat which is led by a living Imam, hereditary Imam, from the Prophet's progeny. And second, that we don't want to burn his book. We are preserving his book. It's a very well-preserved book. After that very dismal situation, Ismailis proved that they were very resilient because they had perfect confidence that the Imam's grace was with them. And I'm sure we will overcome this. This is a difficult situation. It's easier for me to say this because I'm not losing my job. But I am saying this because I'm convinced that people will overcome this. And we have seen the huge outflow of sympathy volunteers, everybody empathetic to each other. They want to help.
Thank you so much, Vizier Shams, for being with us today. Your selfless service, your generosity, humility, and your wealth of knowledge is apparent when you speak. It was a real honor to spend some time with you today. Thanks again.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to brag about myself. Thank you very much.
In Canada, a group of young members of the Ismaili Volunteer Corps, starting from age 3, are learning to give service. They also discuss the importance of voluntary service. On the other side of the world in Singapore, youth volunteers are performing similar tasks. These youth are among the newest members of a tradition of uniformed Ismaili volunteers around the world. Beginning in Bombay in British India, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps has served the Imamat, the Jamaat, and wider society for the past century.
There was a group called Vidya Vinod Club, which was involved in literary activities. There were members who were doing research, writing papers, and they thought of coming up with some organized body, an organized institution, which could be there to support the community, to the fellow human beings, help and protect people at the times of difficulties. And they thought of coming up with an organized body of volunteers.
Thus, the first systematic organization of uniformed volunteers came into existence in 1919. They came to be known as His Highness the Aga Khan's Bombay Volunteer Corps. However, this is a tradition that stretches back 14 centuries to the beginnings of Islam.
For Muslims, the ethic of service is an ethic rooted in the teachings of the Quran Sharif, where service to Allah, to community, to society, in fact, to humanity at large, is an integral part of faith. Muslims are entrusted with the care and protection of their fellow human beings. They're enjoined to do good, to help, to share, and to do that with kindness and compassion.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, in his words and actions, lived this ethic of service to others. He is believed to have said, quote, "None among you is a true believer unless he loves for others what he loves for himself," unquote. Muslims throughout history have drawn inspiration from the Prophet's example and teachings. The values of generosity, kindness, and serving others have remained important in many Muslim communities throughout history. This tradition of service has also been a part of the history of the Shia Ismaili community in various regions of the world, under the guidance and leadership of the Imams.
Through centuries, we have read and heard about Ismailis who have given of their wealth. They've shared, they've taught, they have written, they have given of their expertise and skills, whether that be in building or in developing agriculture. They have looked after the poor and the elderly and the weak, particularly when it came to offering refuge to those in need. It was not just for the benefit of the Ismaili community, but also for other communities in need who sought protection of the Ismailis. So this ethic of service is one deeply rooted in a long-standing tradition of the Ismailis.
The Ismaili Volunteer Corps, founded in 1919, is part of this tradition of service. The early founders of this organization are well known.
The person who was a pioneer in this, who was also the president of Vidya Vinod Club, was a gentleman called Pir Muhammad Madhani. Now, Pir Muhammad Madhani was later the Lieutenant Colonel of the Ismaili Volunteer Corps in India. And he, along with Major Lakpati and a couple of other members of the Vidya Vinod Club, came together and established an organized body and named it His Highness Aga Khan's Bombay Volunteer Corps.
Their first duty was performed at the gateway of India, where they received Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam on his arrival in Bombay. The following day, the Imam visited the Jamaat.
A visit was organized for the Jamaat at Aga Halwadi, and Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah was supposed to arrive there, and the Jamaat was waiting for them. And Pir Muhammad Madhani gets the volunteers and organizes the event. Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah sees this. He is very impressed, and he congratulates the team.
Following colonial military style, the early volunteer corps organized themselves into ranks, had a specific number of members, and wore khaki-colored uniforms. In 1920, Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah granted the use of a coat of arms.
Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah offered his own crest, Taj, to be used as the coat of arms for the Ismaili volunteers. The initial volunteer uniform was khaki. They wore a grayish-black cap, and on cap they had this Taj. But we do see that in late 40s the uniform changes and more colors are added. We see the colors of the Ismaili flag being used in the cap, and various medals that were used. So we see green and red appearing in the uniform now. And later on, as the Jamaat moved to various countries, we see that uniform changes.
On another occasion, the Imam made a surprise announcement to the leadership of the volunteer corps.
Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah says that I am the colonel of this organized body. And he says, where is my uniform? And we have images of Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah wearing that uniform and actually having a photograph taken with the volunteers of the time.
In 1922, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah appointed his son, Prince Ali Khan, as the patron of the volunteers. Later, in 1944, he was made the colonel of the organization. The initial purpose of the early uniformed volunteers was for the safety and security of the Jamaat, and to organize events and visits of the Imam in a dignified and disciplined manner. In 1919, it was an organization for men only.
We are talking about the post-First World War period, where the safety was a major concern, and this group of people actually looked after the Jamaat. So that was the main role of the group in the initial period.
लेडीज़ वॉलंटियर कोर की स्थापना हज़रत इमाम सुल्तान मोहम्मद शाह ने 1921 में की थी। वो टाइम पे 3 यूनिट्स थे, करीमाबाद, हसनाबाद, दरखाना। और वो ज़माना ऐसा था कि लेडीज़ वॉलंटियर मीन्स जो बिफोर 98 इयर्स इतना एजुकेशन नहीं था, इतनी फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं थी। देन टू वो लोग इतना वर्क करते थे सब जमात खाने में। जब भी हज़रत इमाम सुल्तान मोहम्मद शाह की पदरामनी हुए तो जमात की देख रेख रखते थे, उनकी सेवा करते थे, उन लोग को जो भी मतलब चाहिए वो उनकी नीड्स पूरी करते थे। और बाहर भी सब बाहर का भी सोशल वर्क भी करते थे कि जब तभी अपने को इंडिपेंडेंस नहीं था।
If you closely look at the uniform being used in India by the women volunteers, you see a dupatta, a scarf, and on scarf you see a pattern of flowers. If you go close and look at it carefully, what you see is the letters ILVC engraved in those flower petals. And those letters stand for Ismaili Ladies Volunteer Corps. And we've been told that Prince Ali Salman Khan himself approved this design. So we know that various groups evolved over a period of time. We also know that Ismaili scouting, because there were children who wanted to join voluntary services, and scouting was introduced.
From its roots in Bombay, the tradition of uniformed volunteers immediately began to spread to other Jamaats and centres. The same year, in 1919, Karachi's first uniformed volunteer corps was founded at Garden Jamaat Khana by Mukhi Bande Ali Muhammad, under the leadership of President Meher Ali Kimani.
They inspired that in Karachi we may also have such a volunteer corps to serve the Jamaat in a well-disciplined manner. About 40 youths at that time came forward and offered their services for the Jamaat and the Imam. So the volunteer corps in Karachi and Mumbai, both were established in 1919.
Once the organized body was created in Mumbai, it spread to various centers of India. And as Jamaat started moving from Gujarat and various parts of India to Africa, we know that Waras Ibrahim Jamal, on his visit to Bombay from Kisumu, Kenya, met with Major Lakpati. And Major Lakpati coached him in introducing an organized uniformed volunteers in Kisumu, Kenya. So we know that as early as 1923-24, Volunteer Corps moves from India to Africa.
The institution continued to spread throughout the Indian subcontinent into various regions of East Africa and then other parts of the world. In 1972, all Asians were expelled from Uganda, including thousands of Ismailis. Many settled in Europe and North America, leading to the rapid growth of the Jamaat in the West. Before 1972, the Jamaat in the United Kingdom was made up mostly of students from other countries.
In 1973, when the Uganda Jamaat came in, it was a little bit difficult for us to handle it, but we did it. And then I was appointed as a major. Then I had established IVC captains, lieutenants. And then we also appointed captains for all those small Jamaat Khanas so they can run in a better way.
Other countries in Europe also saw the establishment of significant Jamaats. Many members of the France Jamaat migrated from Madagascar, a former French colony. In the late 1970s, the French Jamaat began organizing a volunteer corps, which was formally established in 1980. In Portugal, the roots of the Jamaat lie predominantly in Mozambique, a former Portuguese colony. They also carried with them the tradition of volunteerism as they traveled.
Vim de Lourenço Mares, Moçambique, há 45 anos, mais ou menos. Trabalho nos voluntariado desde os meus 8 anos em Moçambique. Viemos para 74, vim em 74 em Portugal. Começamos a trabalhar no Jamaat Khana, onde era no cinema Lumiar.
In addition to Europe, the first Jamaats were also established during this period in North America. In Toronto, Canada, a number of temporary Jamaat Khanas were established as the size of the Jamaat grew following the Uganda crisis.
In 1972, when officially established the Volunteer Corps, there was about 30 of us.
We didn't have any permanent Jamaat Khana, and after a year we started to have Jamaat Khana, and at that time the volunteers, gents volunteers especially, were doing very hard job because they had to lay the carpets and everything, and then at the end of the day they have to pack everything, put it under the stage.
In the United States, the Uniformed Volunteer Corps began to be established there as early as 1969 in Chicago and spreading to other centers through the 1970s and 80s.
And the very first Jamaat Khana we started volunteering was the first institution that we built. So even though out of 10 we had only one volunteer, but he was nicely fitted with the uniform and the tie and everything else, that he stood out because he became the face, like today, he became the face of the Jamaat.
Throughout its history, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps has aimed to serve the needs of the Jamaat. However, within the ethic of improving the quality of life of all of humanity, the volunteers have also served wider society on many occasions. This has always been an important part of their work from early on, and this tradition continues in many countries today.
There was a flood in 1929 in Saurashtra and Gujarat, and again we see that Ismaili volunteers being present. In 1930, the Bombay Police Commissioner actually requests Ismaili Volunteer Corps to provide a team of trained, qualified volunteers who could look after the safety and the visit of the Governor General.
सिस्टर कम्युनिटी के साथ सर कोई अल्लाह ना करे कोई कुदरती आफात आ जाए, मसलन 2010 में यहाँ आगे एक गाँव रहीमाबाद गाँव है, वहाँ फ्लड शलट आ गई है तो रोड ब्लॉक हो गई है, गाड़ियाँ नहीं चलती थी, वहाँ लोग मैदान आसमान तले बैठे हुए थे। उनकी खिदमत के लिए डीसी साहब ने मुझे रिंग करके बुलाया। उन्होंने कहा कि मेरे पास तो चंद एक मुलाजिम है, इनके थ्रू मैं कुछ भी नहीं कर सकता हूँ, तो इसलिए आप एज ए वॉलंटियर इस्माइली वॉलंटियर मेजर हैं, तो मैं आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि आप अपने वॉलंटियर्स हमें दे दें ताकि यहाँ कुछ खेमे शेमे हैं, कुछ शाही खुर्दनोश है, इनको कुछ अद्वियात हैं, उनको वहाँ तक पहुँचाना है। फिर मैंने 60 जवानों को लेकर पैदल यहाँ से शाम को चला और रात 12 बजे वहाँ पहुँचे, वहाँ खेमे लगाया, वहाँ कुछ अद्वियात की ज़रूरत थी, कुछ खाने पीने की अशिया की ज़रूरत थी, उन तक पहुँचाया। फिर सुबह वहाँ से हम वापस यहाँ आ गए।
ઘણા વર્ષોથી વોલેન્ટિયર્સ એવરી 3 મંથના ઓર્ફનેજમાં જાય છે અને ત્યાં બચ્ચાઓને એક બચ્ચા માટે ફૂડ પેકિંગ કરીને એ લોકોને જ્યારે સ્કૂલનો ટાઈમ હોય છે ત્યારે સ્કૂલની બુક્સ, સ્કૂલ બેગ એવું બધું પેક કરી અને પર્સનલી એક બચ્ચાને આપણે આપવા માટે જાય છે ઓર્ફનેજની અંદર.
Recently, few years back, a building collapsed in the center of the city. We were there in part of the clearing of the debris. We were there in part of the security management at that time. We were also a major part in serving food and hot drinks to people who were clearing up those debris and everything. And we forged together as a community, as one humanity, in part of that calamity.
We as volunteers had gathered a lot of clothes and food items, non-perishable items, and we went to Nyeri with the whole volunteer teams at that time, and we met small young children and adults over there, Muslim adults and young children, and we fed them lunch and then we gave them the clothes. The tears in their eyes when they received those goods, it was such a touching moment that we could outreach and give poor people those clothing and food.
امانگی درسیم خد چیز نیالشانی که سری جماعت خانه آمر کرد کلگی من رفتیم دمیل وقتی اولانتری رفتیم چی شغالی کابل بود چی اونجا سرگیدو بود اونجا کدام چی هست اونجا کدام مکتب هست تمام مکتب نیالشانی میکرد.
We have been involved in numerous outreach activities to benefit both the society and the environment, such as Ramadan on Wheels, where the Jamaat donated food rations to the less privileged. Jamaat also helped to clean up the East Coast beach in the Singapore to mark Earth Day.
We have events like blood drive, we go for feeding the homeless, we do harmony walks, we do fundraising walks, all of that. So the volunteers are actively involved and take part in those events as well.
We know there are families out there who can't afford food. Why don't we go and prepare a meal for them? There's families in need of a home. Why don't we take our time out and give back to the community and say, let's go ahead and help them build a home.
Our volunteers in Canada are much more involved in outreach activities now than they've ever been. And we came up with an expression through the anniversary of Canada being 150 years to give 1 million hours of service, and that really sparked a movement in Canada as to find ways to actually bring the Ismaili volunteer to the external community.
That type of service to society as a civic responsibility is something also we're seeing in our Jamaat. This commitment completely of humility, of tolerance, of respect, being able to serve society is an amazing phenomenon in our Jamaat.
Throughout the past century, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps have been concerned with the safety and security of the Jamaat, as well as helping to organise large events with decorum and dignity. In the life of the Jamaat, no event is more significant than that of the visit of the Imam of the time. The very first duty performed by the Bombay Volunteer Corps in 1919 was to receive Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah and to organise his visit to India. From that time to the global celebration of Maulana Hazar Imam's Diamond Jubilee in Lisbon in 2018, one of the most important and enriching forms of service offered by the volunteers globally over the past century is to serve at a mulaqat of the Imam of the time.
They are there to serve the Jamaat, and Hazrat Imam holds them in the highest esteem of service. He is always in admiration of the service, the way in which the volunteers position themselves with humility, with love, with commitment, that they give that service.
I'm aware of all the effort, time, and other resources which volunteers and innumerable people from all walks of life have offered to make this mulaqat possible. I convey to all of them my warm and deep gratitude and my admiration for their collective effort.
From Bombay in 1919 until today, wherever the Jamaat has lived, the tradition of organised uniform volunteers has spread and thrived. This is rooted in a long tradition of service that stretches back to the beginnings of Islam. The members who have served the Ismaili Volunteer Corps around the world have selflessly given of their time to improve the quality of life of the Jamaat and wider society. Rooted in a sense of love and devotion to the Imam of the time, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps today has grown into a remarkable global institution.
Well, I would say to you, continue this wonderful service that the Imam has always talked about. Inculcate this in the young men and women so that they can continue generations after generations this service, for not only there to serve the Jamaat, but serve society at large, but also with that, make your Imam happy.
I am fortunate to lead an international community with a strong social conscience. Bridging north and south, east and west, the Ismailis have a long tradition of philanthropy, self-reliance, and voluntary service. Wherever they live, they faithfully abide by the Quranic ethic of a common humanity and a dignity of man. They willingly pool knowledge and resources with all those who share our social ethic to help improve the quality of life of less fortunate men, women, and children.
And now, in keeping with our Friday night reflection tradition, we will end our show with musical expressions from some of our wonderful artists. Thank you to all of you for joining. It has been a pleasure to be your host. Please stay on to enjoy our musical piece and see you next Friday. Ya Ali Madad.
خورشید درخشان
تابیده بر برگ درختان،
رقصان با باد شادمان،
شاخه هایشان دستان در دست،
میوه هایشان هر یک به یک رنگ، همراه و همدل.
Can you hear my heart beating? Can you hear it calling? Can you feel the longing? Your presence is calming. The way you share your time and your knowledge, your life, your light, your strength and your promise. Your smile is inviting. I seek and I'm finding. It's how we give, it's how we live. Ayo, ayo, ay, so much to celebrate. Ayo, ayo, ay, I pray we stay this way. Ayo, ayo, ay, you put me first. There's a love that's felt and heard. Oh, work, no word.
Le toi en toi, c'est le moi en moi.
Chahe jo naam do, chahe jo kaam ho. Nous sommes unis, nous sommes une famille. Pour tout ce que nous avons, nous vous remercions. Chahe jo ho, hum saath rahenge. Wasta, dasta jamaat hai. Ayo, ayo, ay, so much to celebrate. Ayo, ayo, ay, I pray we stay this way. Ayo, ayo, ay, you put me first. There's a love that's felt and heard. Oh, work, no word. Warmth and compassion is kindness in action. The kind that'll be there without even asking.
The thing that changed it all for me began when me became weak.
Your smile is inviting. I seek and I'm finding. It's how we give, it's how we live. Ayo, ayo, ay, so much to celebrate.
Parabéns pelos 100 anos, parabéns a todos os voluntários.
આપણે આ સેવાના 100 વર્ષ પૂરા કર્યા છે અને આ 100 વર્ષમાં ઘણી પ્રગતિ કરી છે અને ઘણું સુખ પામ્યું છે.
Это были замечательные 100 лет счастья, добра, любви, служения и единства. Поздравляю!
We can't wait for the next 100 years!
И нам не терпится пронести свою улыбку через следующие 100 лет.
One hundred years of these smiley volunteers.